Meanwhile, the DOJ is looking to wind down President Trump's 2 federal criminal cases ahead of his inauguration on January 20th. Long-standing policy prevents DOJ attorneys from prosecuting a sitting president. Special counsel Jack Smith could potentially write a report on his findings instead. The Wall Street Journal editorial board out with a piece writing this: voters rejected Smith's prosecutions of Trump. Meanwhile, Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan also reportedly considering tossing out former President Trump's felony conviction. He's expected to make the decision by next week. Trump's Georgia case still remains in limbo with no trial date set. However, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis won re-election this week. Joining me now is George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. He is also a Fox News contributor, constitutional law expert, and the author of The Indispensable Right. Jonathan, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
Give us your take on all of this. I mean, I guess the thinking is the president, a sitting president, has to focus on the American people and not be thinking about other things personal to him. I understand the DOJ winding these things down, but what about the rest? What is your take here?
Well, these have the feelings of battles long after the war is lost, because the lawfare campaign did not work. Even people at other networks, liberal commentators, criticized some of these cases, like the one in Manhattan, that selective prosecution is unfounded and unprecedented in how it was used against the president-elect. And the question now is, what are these prosecutors going to do about it? Their cases are floating around like the Flying Dutchman without a port of call. And the answer to that we sort of know with regard to special counsel Jack Smith. He became a lame duck prosecutor at about 2:30 a.m. last Wednesday. It's not just simply that the policy against prosecuting a sitting president. The new administration is not going to continue Smith. And I said almost 2 years ago that this would be the largest jury verdict in history, and it was. And he now has nowhere to go in all practicality. So the expectation is that he will drop those cases. The question will then be Judge Merchan. He could hold another hearing next week, but he said that he was going to make a decision on immunity. If he decides that the president does not have immunity on all of these charges and continues towards sentencing, that will occur by roughly the 26th of this month. If he tries to impose a jail term or some type of limitation on the president's movements, that's not going to happen, and it's going to be appealed. Keep in mind, in my view, Merchan made an unholy mess of this entire trial. There are layers of reversible error, in my view, and that's without even considering the sentencing. Those haven't been fully reviewed yet. So that has a long way to go. I don't expect any order of incarceration. I expect something like a conditional discharge. He could even claim that being president will qualify as community service. So he's a lot of options there. With regard to Fani Willis, like Attorney General James in New York, these are two prosecutors who are the face of lawfare. They're not going to go away. Rage is addictive, and they have really fueled that. Their supporters want to continue it. And one thing, Maria, to keep in mind is that with both houses likely in Republican control and the White House, we're not going to have the same impeachment calls and investigations that hounded Trump in his first term. But that center of gravity is largely to shift to people like James and Willis, who are Democratic prosecutors. And they don't view this election as a rejection of what they did, and they're going to continue it. The irony is Trump didn't have any greater friend than James and Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. Every time they held another hearing, he went up in the polls.
Yeah, that's true. It's so true. Jonathan, the fact that the DOJ winds this stuff down tells me right away this was all lawfare to begin with. And, the people knew it. The people obviously voted that way in this landslide. And yet these liberal states are still digging in. I mean, they're vowing to fight against this incoming Trump administration. Look at Governor Gavin Newsom in California, calling for a special legislative session to bolster the state's ability to counter Trump policies. In New York, you've got Attorney General Letitia James warning that she's ready to fight back against Trump once again. Watch this.
We did not expect this result, but we are prepared to respond to this result. And my office has been preparing for several months because we've been here before. We faced this challenge before, and we used the rule of law to fight back. And we are prepared to fight back once again.
I mean, Jonathan, this is just outrageous. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, same thing, vowing to fight against Trump as if anybody is planning to go after the people of New Jersey and Illinois. Your reaction?
Well, I watched the James press conference, which was insufferable, but it was also delusional. I mean, you had this attorney general acting like everything's going great when she had such a huge role in this reelection. It was because of her lawfare that repelled many voters. Many of these voters don't particularly like Donald Trump, but they hated what was being done through lawfare and limiting free speech and all these other measures. As for these governors, the man's not even in office yet. And you've got Pritzker saying they'll have to come through me. And this type of chest pounding is going to become more and more loud as we get near the inauguration. And it's a continuation of panic politics. The suggestion that all of them were saying, many of them expressly saying that this would be our last election, that dictatorship is here and it's going to be the end of democracy. People didn't buy that because American citizens are not chumps. I mean, they know that we've had 2 centuries of the most stable constitutional system in the history of the world, and they're not buying the chest pound.
No, they were not buying it. And you write this in your new op-ed on foxnews.com, writing Trump's victory puts an end to Democrat attacks on the Supreme Court. You also predict that Trump could have a chance to pick 2 more Supreme Court justices should Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito decide to retire. We don't know if that's the case, but there are some Democrats calling for Justice Sotomayor to step down right now. So President Biden can appoint a liberal justice before leaving office. Tell us more about that.
Well, it is really amazing to watch these same figures who blew every call before the election, giving advice saying, now Sotomayor resign. That would be a remarkably stupid decision, in my view. Because, first of all, Sotomayor is not going anywhere. She's in fine health. She's mentally sharp as ever. She's having a great legacy on the court from the left. It's really disgraceful to see the left turning on her as they did previously with Justice Breyer. But what happens if you miss the mark? That's what's the problem with these short sellers, is that they make these demands. What happens if you don't get it? Then you've got a vacant seat on the Supreme Court, and Trump could have 3 nominees. He's on course to having the most nominations of any president in the history of certainly the 9-member court. Yeah. And in my view, he has done well with his last 3 justices. They have proven to be extraordinarily good justices. Yeah. Well, they're ready to jump ship the way they were ready to jump ship on Joe Biden. Right. And he was all smiles the other day, talking about Trump coming in and that he spoke with Trump. Jonathan, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. We so appreciate your knowledge and experience. Thank you for spending the time. Thank you, Maria. Jonathan Turley. Stay with us. We'll be right back.